Well, of course, all of us are wondering what could possibly lead someone to carry out such a horrific act. And joining us now to talk about this is Dr. Joshua Weiner. Dr. Weiner, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. We know that you specialize in young children and adolescents as well. What are the conversations that parents should be having with their kids tonight about what they see on the news or maybe hear at school on Monday?
What I think parents really need to be cautious about is with young elementary school age kids, I really think they should limit and hopefully not allow their kids to watch any of this on the news. Because with particularly young kids, 8 and under, if they continue to see these images over and over on the news, it's going to be very confusing for them. They may think this trauma is continuing to occur over and over again. So with elementary school age kids, you want to be particularly careful. Also, for parents of elementary school age kids, the parents really need to keep their own emotions in check because at that age, kids are really taking their cues on safety from their parents. So if their parents seem very worried, if their parents are saying, I'm scared for you to go to school on Monday, of course their child is going to then be anxious on Monday to go to school. Now, when kids get older, middle school, high school, I think you can have a much more realistic conversation about things, talking about guns, talking about violence, talking about mental health issues.
We're talking about K through 4, young children, which is so hard for all of us to wrap our arms around. But we've been showing sound bites, them talking, sounding composed, remembering what they saw, what they heard. Is it just that they're too young to really know or have experienced death before? And how do they heal?
You know, it's not surprising at all for me to see them be very composed and calm. In general, what happens after a major traumatic experience is at first people have this sense of what we call derealization. It's almost as if what happened was a dream. They probably have a hard time even processing what happened. So as parents, we understand this a lot more. We may be more traumatized than the kids themselves.
Interesting. We, of course, know very little about the suspect, as we've been mentioning throughout the hour, but how does someone become so detached and angry that they go in targeting their own mother and then take out so many young children at the same time?
It is so hard to know, but of course it's always the usual suspects, right? Drugs or alcohol, major mental illness like schizophrenia or some psychotic illness. These are all things that, of course, we need to look into and consider. But it's also possible that this man may have just been a very angry, unhappy guy. It's scary. I've had some patients in my practice over the years who've said to me, you know, I feel like my life has been so worthless that I actually watch the news and I hear about these people who commit these mass atrocities, and I think that sometimes I could be that person because at least that person has made a difference in the world. Obviously, it's a very horrible, horrific thing that's happened, but to a person who's that miserable, who feels like their life has been so worthless, in some way they have made a difference.
Could this have been a stressor that set this gunman off, or more likely something that was in the planning stages for a while?
It's very hard to know that also. Obviously, he had the ammunition. He was dressed in a way to go into the school. There obviously was some planning. This was not a in the heat of the moment violent act. So that's different. So there was some element of planning. But just because somebody plans something like this does not mean at all that they are not severely mentally ill. You can be psychotic as could be, hearing voices, have no idea what's going on in reality, and still plan and execute an attack like this.
Of course, we feel for the families of the victims, but oftentimes, days later, we have to take a look at the families of the suspects in these tragedies. Would there be warning signs always, or not necessarily?
Probably there were some warning signs. Probably the young man was having mood issues. Maybe if he was psychotic, they would have known that he was not seeming to really be in touch with what was really going on in the world. Certainly if he was abusing drugs or alcohol significantly, he would not have been acting normal. But I think we also have to keep in mind that nobody expects that anybody is going to commit such a horrific crime. So I think that even if somebody is having a difficult time, I think nobody really assumes that their child or their friend is going to be that guy who does this horrible thing.
So many people to heal. There were 500 students at this elementary school. There are first responders who saw all of this unfold, and there are teachers and staff too. Talk about that healing process for the grown-ups as well.
It's going to take a while. Obviously, the people who were most closely affected, so those kids who saw the gunman, who heard the gunshots, who saw the blood, who saw the violence, those are going to be kids who are at a much higher risk of developing problems. But I think all the kids, all the faculty in the school, the first responders, all of them are going to have a little bit of difficulty dealing with what they just saw. Typically, what you're going to see is these people are going to have some appetite issues, some sleep issues. They're going to be fearful of returning to school. They might be fearful if they have children, first responders have children, sending their kids to school. But in general, most of these things are going to wane over the course of several days to a week. In general, when somebody's exposed to a major trauma, whether it's a war, a hurricane, or a shooting like this, about 15% of the population goes on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. So it seems like about 15% of the population just tends to be more vulnerable to developing problems after having witnessed or been a part of these traumas.
Dr. Joshua Weiner, thank you for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it. It's going to be a tough time for a lot of families this evening.
It is.